information than we do as a nation, but programmatic, technical, and legal challenges, as well as concerns about privacy and the role of government, have hampered progress. Congress over the past few years has tried, so far without success, to pass laws addressing the need for comprehensive cyber policy, especially on information sharing. The fact is, 20th century laws cannot effectively deal with 21st century threats.
The director of the CIA there. We're back with Republican presidential candidate Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator Paul, France is reconsidering some of their anti-terror legislation, perhaps giving police more power. And you've been a strong voice for civil liberties, but also critical of certain surveillance programs. And I'm just wondering, in light of the changing threat of ISIS, whether or not you've reconsidered some of your positions and what we should do to keep this country safe.
You know, I think there will always be those who advocate for giving up your liberty in exchange for somehow getting more security. But what we found is when we've allowed warrantless searches, basically looking at all Americans' records, the bulk collection program, we didn't catch any terrorists. In fact, many people are mistaken. It's still in place as we speak, and it didn't stop this program. In France, they have a similar program, but I call it our program on steroids. France has a program that invades privacy 1,000 times more without restraints, and they didn't stop this. So the question is, could we give up all our liberty and maybe be more secure? Perhaps, but then what are we fighting for? What differentiates us from them if we're not actually fighting for our liberties, the right to be left alone and not to have an all-powerful government that looks at every aspect of our everyday? So I'm not for giving up more liberty.
What would be more effective then?
Well, I think what you have to do is, if you spend all of your time spying on every American or every French citizen, I think you get too much information. In fact, the psychologist Herbert Simon talked about how having more information doesn't always lead to understanding. That if you have so much information that overwhelms you, maybe you aren't doing a better job. So I think that we should target those who want to attack us. We should use information, and by all means, we should look at all the records that we can possibly get to of terrorists or potential terrorists. All I'm saying is use the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment says you have to name an individual, you have to name the suspicion, you have to ask a judge. But there is no authorization under the Constitution to look at everyone's record without suspicion.
So does that bring us full circle, though, for example, to the refugees and to those perhaps that you would like to have extra surveillance on, if I can use that term, if they come into this country? Do they not get the same liberties that you'd be advocating for Americans? Because they're in a specific target group?
Those who are here should be investigated based on suspicion, the same way an American would. But those who want to come here don't have a right to come to America. You don't have a right to be an American citizen. Most people don't realize this, but refugees come here and immediately are put on welfare. There are whole agencies set up to put them in government housing, government cash assistance, and they're basically put into our welfare programs. In Kentucky, we have a lot of people out of work, a lot of coal miners out of work. I've got disabled veterans saying to me on the phone just as recently as last night that they are having trouble survive on their disability payments as veterans. They don't understand why we're going to take in the world's poor and put them on our welfare programs. So there are some discussions we ought to have about this before we let it happen.
I only have about 30 seconds here. Remember, just for our viewers, that it'd be 10,000 is the number that the administration would like to admit to the United States. Just a final thought, if you would, Senator. There are innocent people involved in the conflict in Syria. We know that. We see the children. The president mentions widows and children often when it comes to this debate. What do we do for them? They're fleeing the evil that's in their land. How do we figure out a way to help the people that we, because of the power and strength of the United States, can?
One of the biggest supporters of Sunni terrorism in the world is Saudi Arabia. Qatar is up there. UAE is up there. Sometimes the government, sometimes private donors. What I would say is no more sales of any arms to these countries until they start accepting refugees. The Gulf states have poured gasoline on this fire. They haven't taken a refugee. Iran's not taking any refugees, and they've been an arsonist in this situation as well. So those who live there need to step up, and we need to say we're not going to sell arms to you anymore if you're not willing to do your fair share.
That leads us into another conversation I look forward to having. Senator Paul, great to have you on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenna.
We're joined now by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, 2016 Republican presidential candidate. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different issues, Senator Paul, but you listened along with us from what we know from France and the news that we've heard. What do you think we do next here at home?
Well, I think no one knows, but I think definitely our sympathies lie with the French and hope that we get to the bottom very quickly, who instituted these attacks. And I think we have to be prepared. I think that we have to be very cautious about who comes to visit our country. In my town, Bowling Green, Kentucky, we had 2 refugees come a couple of years ago and attempted to buy Stinger missiles. When we investigated them further, we found out that one of them actually had a fingerprint on a bomb fragment from Iraq, and we should have known better. He was on a list, and we weren't doing a very good job vetting them. The 2 Boston bombers came here as refugees. So it's absurd for President Obama to say, oh, these refugees are women and children are of no risk. We have many, many examples of refugees coming here under false pretenses and turning out to be a real risk to our country.
There's something immediately. You mentioned what happened in Kentucky in 2013, and that produced some legislation from you that I know you're building upon. But in the meantime, you have some more immediate legislation that you would like the Senate to consider when it comes to the refugees perhaps coming into our country. What is that, and why do you think it matters?
Well, I think our biggest entry for those who would attack us is coming to visit, basically coming as a refugee or coming as a visitor or coming as a student. We have nearly 1 million students that come here each year. About 150,000 of them come from the Middle East. So we do have to be vigilant. We have to have a good program in place. We also have to be concerned about French citizens coming here. Most of the people involved in the attack, I think, are going to turn out to be French citizens. And what we have in place right now is something called a visa waiver. So if you want to come from France, you don't have to get a visa at all. And so I would stop that. I would say nobody comes unless they're part of Global Entry, which is a program in which you get background checks. We need to know who's coming to visit us, and until we get a better handle on it, I think we just need to stop the process, slow down and say, let's figure out who's already in our country and figure out if anyone here already is inclined to attack us.
Post-September 11th, the Bush administration put into enforcement from the Department of Homeland Security a program that would carefully watch individuals from certain geographic locations around the world, specifically areas where there's a high probability of terrorism. That program is no longer part of the Department of Homeland Security. There were many critics that said it was profiling and it didn't fit. What do you think of that program now and bringing a program like that back?
You know, I've advocated certain aspects of that program, and I don't think you profile people based on their religion, but you do profile people based on suspicion. And if they fit certain characteristics of suspicion, meaning that they have something in their behavior that warns you that they are a threat to the United States or to our people, sure, they should have increased observation. But we already know that predominantly the people who have come here to attack us have come from the Middle East. So in our bill, we have about 35 countries that we've listed that have significant jihadist movements, and we've said, you know what? We need you to stop all that now. I mean, we have 11 million people in our country who are here illegally. 40% of them are visa overstays. My question is, if you apply that to the Middle Eastern visitors, do we have 40% of them staying here and disobeying the laws that we have on the books? Let's find out exactly who's here, what they're doing, and if they're obeying the law before we add to that number. If we can't even count those who are here and we cannot apply the law to those who are here, we have no business adding to the problem.
Among critics of those who say, let's pause when it comes to refugees coming to this country, is the President of the United States. And he had some very direct words about Republicans just recently. I'd like to play a little bit of that sound and get your reaction.
When individuals say that we should have a religious test and that only Christians, proven Christians, should be admitted, that's offensive and contrary to American values. I cannot think of a more potent recruitment tool for ISIL than some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of here during the course of this debate.
What's your thought on that?
You know, I'm not too interested in being lectured to by the president. His administration is making the assertion that refugees are no risk to us. 2 refugees from Iraq came to my hometown, Bowling Green, Kentucky, and tried to buy Stinger missiles to attack us. The 2 Boston bombers were here as refugees. There's a couple dozen Somalis who came here as refugees who have gone back to Syria or have gone to Syria, and there are some here who I think are a threat to the country and are being observed. To say that the refugee program is not a potential threat to the United States is to willfully close your eyes and to put us at risk. This is something that's very important, and the first thing we do to protect our homeland and our people is we should be very, very cautious about those who come to visit, study,